Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday talk, brought to you by Room to Grow, Sandby, and Straight Nature. It's wonderful to see you all here again. But before we start, obviously, I just want to thank our sponsors, without which this wouldn't be possible. Firstly, to Straight Nature. Straight Nature is the leading specialist natural history publisher in Southern Africa and is associated with the best-selling and most highly regarded field guides in the region. Straight Nature publishes full-color illustrated books across a variety of subjects, including birds, mammals, reptiles, trees and flowers, the marine environment, geology, astronomy, general wildlife, and of course, the ever-popular children's nature. And then from myself, Room to Grow, I'm Brett, the owner of Room to Grow. We're an exterior design and project management company that's been designing and creating outdoor living spaces in and around Cape Town since 2002. And we offer a complete suite of design, installation, and maintenance to our residential, commercial, and retail clients. And you can find out more about us on our socials and website. Then it's my great pleasure today to introduce Eddie Germiquet. Think about bouquet. Eddie was born in Mozambique, where his parents were missionaries and grew up speaking Tsonga with the local children and French at home. He later learned English and Afrikaans in South Africa, followed by Latin and Greek, giving him a lifelong fascination with languages and their origins, a foundation that has proved invaluable deciphering scientific names. After 40 years serving Presbyterian congregations across South Africa, while also completing his honors, masters, and PhD, Eddie applied his research skills to write South African bird names, origins, meanings, exploring the fascinating stories behind the names of the region's birds. So, Eddie, we're very excited to listen to your talk, and over to you. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I've just completed this book on South African bird names. So it's just the birds of South Africa, not Southern Africa, and mostly looking at their scientific names, which has fascinated me since a child. I had no idea what those names meant, even what language they were in. And during COVID, when we had the lockdown, then I decided to go back to my 60 years back in my story and begin to find out what these words meant. So this is the book there. So the scientific names, where do they come from? What do they mean? And what would a paraphrase in English be? That's something that always interested me. Occasionally I look at the common names or the English names as well, if there's something interesting. Now, all the birds, like animals and plants, have a binomial. That's a genus and a species name. And I was imagining, if I had to get a binomial, what would my binomial be? What would my genus and my specific name be? And I came up with, well, I'm not an ornithologist, but I would say I'm an enthusiastic amateur. And I'm going to do what I do with bird names now. What does enthusiastic actually mean? I break it up.
An hour and a half.
Enthusiastic. Greek, it's from the Greek, en theos, meaning in God. And then the word amateur, which is a French word, amateur. You break that up, amateur. If you did a bit of Latin at school, your first verb would have been amo, to love. So an enthusiastic amateur, which I think I am, would be somebody who's in God and does something he loves. In other words, divinely inspired to do what one loves doing. So it's a pleasure to do what one loves doing. Now, when we come to birds, they did not choose their names. They're quite happy to carry on their lives as they've always had for millennia. But it's people who have ascribed names to birds. So it's really a reflection of what people have done or seen or heard or thought about birds. So these are the categories that I've made. They're my own categories of how names have been allocated to birds. What people saw about birds. What people heard about birds, mostly the calls. And then a little bit further removed, what people thought about bird. This becomes interesting. And a little bit even more removed, what people imagined. Now we come into the world of mythology. And then being human, there's always one element we have to include. There will be mistakes. So now we start with what people saw about birds. And the main thing that they would have seen is something to do with the wing. Birds have wings, and we don't have wings. And so quite a lot of bird names have got the word wing included in the name. And the Greek word for wing is pterix. It might sound very strange or unfamiliar, but actually we do use this word, and you're all familiar with it. When we use the word helicopter, you see the word pter here. It comes from pterix. So a helicopter has something to do with a wing. And the helix, well, we all have it in our DNA, is a spiral. So in actual fact, a helicopter in English is a spiraling wing. And that's exactly what a helicopter does. It's a wing that spirals. Now we come to some of the old names. Pterodactyl. That might sound strange, but if you see ptero there, you recognize the word wing. And then dactyl, there's fingers. So the pterodactyl is a winged fingers. It was a flying dinosaur, reptile. It didn't have feathers, it had skin between its fingers. But later on came Archaeopteryx. And you recognize the pteryx once again. There's the pteryx and the archaeology, the old things or the beginning things. So Archaeopteryx is the ancient wing. This one's important because it's the first fossil that shows the existence of feathers on these flying creatures. Now we come to bird names. When I first came across Cameroptera, I thought, what kind of reptile is this? But then when we look at it, we see the word ptera in it. So it's something to do with the wing. And we look at the first part, Cameroptera. Perhaps that sounds familiar. The camera, you all got cameras, I'm sure. And in Greek, a camera is an arched cover. So it's a wing that is curved in a way. So if you look at the little bird that I've drawn here, it's a forest bird. It's got to fly between twigs and branches and leaves. So it's got small wings, but it's got a big curve, which gives it a high lift, high wing loading, and it can flit around amongst birds with fast flapping wings. So that's an arched cover. Pteron, wing. Now there are two Cameropteras. There's the greenback and the gray-backed. The green-backed is called Cameroptera brachyura, which is Greek. And brachyura means short tail. The gray-backed is called brevicauda, and that's Latin, and it means short tail. So they've both got exactly the same name, but just in different languages. The next bird is a familiar one, the spur-winged goose. And you can recognize the spur just sticking out, which it uses in defense. Now it's got a complicated sounding name, Pterocles gabensis. Perhaps you recognize the pterus again, something to do with the wing. And in the front part of the wing, there's a plectrum or a spur. So a spur-winged or a plectrum-winged gabensis is the type locality. The specimen that was described came from Gambia. So it's a bird with a spur on its wing that originates from Gambia. We come to the sandgrouse, a double-banded sandgrouse. Here it is, it appears. Quickly we look at the double-banded. There's a little white band there, followed by a black band. The bird's looking away a bit, so it's not very clear, but that's where the double band comes from. And its scientific name is Pterocles bicinctus. The bicinctus is, you can imagine two, cincture is a belt, two belts, so two-banded. But you recognize the ptero once again, the wing. So there's something special about the wing. The word kles in Greek means notable or splendid. So this is a bird that has a splendid wing, a double-banded bird with splendid wings. Why is that? The sandgrouse has got long primary feathers. It enables it to fly fast and long distances. It lives in arid areas and to be away from predators like hawks and eagles, but it has to get its daily drink of water, which could be even 100 kilometers away. And so they have wonderful wings. So that opened my eyes to this wonderful bird, a double-banded bird with splendid wings. We move away from the wing parts now. We come to knob-billed duck. Perhaps you're familiar with it. A strange-looking bird, and its name in scientific language might even appear even more strange, Sarkidiornis melanotus. But let's break that up a little bit. You might even recognize the word ornis, ornithology bird. Sarkidiornis. What does that mean? Flesh, strange bird. It's a bird that's got a piece of strange flesh, and you can imagine it, it's sitting there on its beak. And the second part of the name, melanotus. If anybody's name is Melanie, well, it means black, like melanoma. And notus is the back of the bird. So its paraphrase would be an odd and fleshy black-backed bird. And there is its black back with the odd and fleshy bit on its beak. We come to the southern black flycatcher, a very beautiful bird, also with an interesting name, Melaean ornis pamelania. We come across Melanie once again. There's the name Melanie with ornis, so it's a black bird. And if anybody in the audience is called Pamela, well, you've got a friend here in this bird. It's Melania is black once again, and Pam is the prefix. It should be P-A-N, but when an N precedes an M, then it changes to an M. So it becomes, instead of Pan-Melania, it's Pamela, Pamelania. So what is this bird? It's an entirely black bird. That's all that it means. We come to the crowned eagle, and we have a look at it. It's got a beautiful little crown, and its scientific name is Stephanoaetus coronatus. If anybody in this audience is called Stephen, you've got a friend here, Stephanoaetus. Let's break that up. Stephanoaetus. Stephano is a garland, a wreath. Aetus is an eagle. And coronatus you would obviously recognize from coronation. So what is this paraphrase? It would become an eagle garlanded with a crown. Now I'm going to ask you to work this one out with me. We start with the scientific name. Let's try and work it out together. What does this mean? Ptero, you recognize the ptero, its wing, and then we come to droma. A velodrome is where cyclists race. A hippodrome is where horses race. So it's something to do with a wing that races, or a racing wing. We go to the second part of the word, macro, you all know. Big, large, long, ptera, once again, wing. So this bird has got something to do with a racing wing and a long wing. Pterodroma, we break it up. Macroptera, a winged racer with long wings. I'll give you 3 seconds. Anybody can think what bird this is? It's a great winged petrel. And we're going to let it fly in with its great wings. There it comes, beautiful bird. Now we move on to names where which are related to what birds' sounds make and what people have heard. Once again, it's people who hear and allocate names. So that, what do you imagine is the most familiar one where the name relates to the call of the bird? 3 seconds? Okay. Common cuckoo. The cuckoo clock is even, its scientific name is cuculus. That's the Latin version for the Greek. And canorus is its song. Latin canorus, musical, having a pleasant musical voice. So cuculus canorus actually means a cuckoo with a musical chord. Now I hope you can hear it. Now, you heard it loud and clear, I hope. The next bird is the Pterocles batus. Now Pterocles is nothing else than an imitation of its chord. Its scientific name is the reverse of that, Batus Pterocles. Now the word batus comes from Aristotle's day, that's 300 years BC. And Aristotle describes or uses the word batus to describe a bird that perches in shrubs. So it's being used for this species of birds. But the name Pterocles is an invention by the French ornithologist, the first South African ornithologist, Francois Levaillant, the Frenchman. And he figured that its call could be represented with the letters pre-rit. So it became known as the Pterocles batus. So Levaillant is the one, and this is what he heard. And imagine pre-rit. The next bird is the brown-crowned chagra. Once again, we come to chagra, and that also is an invented word, which is onomatopoeic. So its scientific name is chagra. It's genus Australis, from the south, Australia. Those from Australia, you're in the south. So chagra onomatopoeic, and Levaillant, in his diary, in his notes, writes it. Its call goes cha, 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 chagra. So that's how he describes it. Australis, obviously from the south. Let's hear him. Listen for the cha, 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 chagra. Now we come to the African fish eagle. I'm sure you all know this one. It might look complicated, Ichthyophaga vocifer, but we break it up. Ichthyophaga, ichthyology, study of fish. Phaga is to phagos, an eater. A bacteriophage is bacteria that eats us. So an ichthyophaga is a bird that eats fish. Vocifer, combination of Latin vox, voice, ifer, from ferro, to carry. When you transfer something, you carry something across. So here there's a voice that is carried. So this is a bird, a fish eater with a voice that carries. This is what it means. And its mate will answer from 0.5 kilometer away. We come to the black cuckoo, Cuculus clamosus. You can recognize something of clamora in there if you know its call. Clamosus, having a crying call. A cuckoo, so Cuculus clamosus, a cuckoo with a crying call. Listen to, you probably hear it in the bushveld. What it's actually saying is, I'm so sick. We come to the pale chanting goshawk, and its scientific name is Melierax conosus. Melierax, we break that up into the two parts. Melos is a melodious, hierax is a horse, so you hawk. So you can imagine what it means. A chanting hawk. Canorus, chanting melodious. Once again, Francois Levaillant is the one who gave it this name, and he called it a faucon chanteur, a singing falcon. African paradise flycatcher. It's a complicated sounding name, but perhaps you recognize phone, telephone, something to do with the sound. So terpsi is something that describes its sound. Terpsi phone. And terpo in Greek, it means to delight or to gladden. And phone is a sound. So it's a delightful sound. And viridis means glossy green. If you look at the head of the bird, it's got a glossy green head. So this is a glossy green bird that makes a delightful sound. That's what its name means. And here is the bird. You can see something around the head, the glossy green, and this is the delightful sound. Gold star for anyone who can guess why this bird is included in the sounds. Sigulus silens. Sigelos means disposed to silence. Silens, Latin, mostly silent. So this is a bird that is disposed to silence. So obviously it's included because what's fascinating or interesting about it is that this bird makes no sound. In fact, the male makes a very small, soft, high-pitched sound, but it was Levaillant who gave it the name silens, silent, because he noticed that the female was totally silent. So that's what drew his attention to that. I won't make any further comments on that one. Now we come to what people thought. Now what they thought about, which becomes interesting. We look at nightjars. Just briefly, nightjar, a night bird, and jar refers to the call of some of these birds. The European nightjar and the square-tailed nightjar have a jarring, frog-like, sustained, which it can sustain for 2 minutes. When I heard it first, I said, when does the bird take a breath? But it seems to have micro breaths. But what's important is its scientific name. The genus is Capri mulgus. And what does that mean? Capri it means a goat. The Tropic of Capricorn is named the goat because it's under the constellation of the goat. If you're a capricious person, it means you behave like a goat. I'm sure that's none of you there, but you all jumpy, and if you watch a goat, it doesn't know what it's doing. And mulgus, is to milk. Now, Aristotle wrote about this bird. The Old English name is goatsucker. It became known as a goatsucker. And let me read to you what Aristotle writes. This is 300 years BC. The goatsucker is a mountain bird, larger than the blackbird and less so than the cuckoo. It lays 2 or not more than 3 eggs and is slothful in its disposition. It flies against the goats and sucks them, whence its name, goatsucker. They say that when the udder has been sucked, that it gives no more milk, and that the goat goes blind. The bird is not quick-sighted by day, but sees well at night. And 320 years later, Pliny, the first century Roman author and commander of a fleet, he writes this, and you can see how he depends on Aristotle. Those goats called goatsuckers, which resemble rather large blackbirds, are night thieves. They enter the shepherd's stall and fly at the goat's udders in order to suck their milk, which injures the udder and makes it perish. And then the goats that they have milked in this way go blind. So there's the old English name. In reality, these nightjars do not suck goats. They have a wide gape, which attracted the attention of the early observers. They need to catch insects in flight, so they've got a wide gape, which made them think that they can suck goats' udders. But then they are attracted to the goat pens because there are insects there. So they go there for the insects and they catch them. But people thought, we're under what people thought. They thought that they would go and suck the goat's milk. We come to the Jaegers, from the German meaning hunter. If you think of the Afrikaans jachter, then you're on the right track. And here is example. This is the long-tailed Jaeger. And the interesting thing about these birds is that they are kleptoparasitic. They get their food by stealing it from other birds. And their scientific genus is Pterocles. Very interestingly, it means concerning excrement. Now, what happened and what people thought was happening is that these Jaegers would attack seabirds returning from their foraging at sea with fish in their gullets or holding fish in their bills like the puffins do. And they would attack them, harass them, even grab them by the tail and turn them upside down, all in flight. Birds being so harassed would after a while begin to regurgitate. They would vomit. And then these Jaegers would then dive after the falling food and catch it, or even if it lands in the water, they would go and scoop it up. But what early observers thought was taking place is that the harassed birds was losing its bowels. It was so traumatized that it was loosening its bowels and dropping its feces, and that these birds would then go and catch the feces, what they thought was the feces, and eat it. So that's how they inherited the name Pterocles. What they thought was they were eating excrement. We come to the noddies. This is the lesser noddy, and its genus name is Anus. It's Greek. The word nous in Greek, just the nous part means your mind, your brain. Anus means no brain, brainless. And we talk about the brown noddy, whose scientific name is Anus stolidus. And what does that mean? It means a silly, mindless bird. Stolidus is stupid. So even the word noddy means, it can mean a bird that nods its head, but it also, if somebody's a noddy, they're also a little bit, the lift doesn't go to the top floor. So why are these birds called silly, mindless, stupid birds? What happened is that the early explorers and seafarers would land on a bird island, and they would go up to these birds who'd never seen humans before, and they would just sit there. They could take them, grab them, and wring their necks and cook them. And so they called them stupid, mindless, silly birds because they just allowed themselves to be caught in this way. But when we reflect on it, it's actually an indictment on human beings to call birds that trust you silly and stupid for doing that. Macaroni penguin. Perhaps you've wondered why a penguin is called macaroni. Its scientific name is Eudeptes chrysolophus. If you have the prefix in your name, if you're called Eugene, for example, it means you're a good person. I'm sure that applies to anyone listening. Deptes is a diver. Chrysolophus chryso is golden, lophus is a crest. So it's a good diver with a golden crest. Let's see what he looks like. There he comes waddling along, and you can see his golden crest. Now we come to the interesting part. In the 1700s, in England, there was a hairstyle used by people called dandies, men called dandies, who would adorn themselves with a very huge hairstyle. Let's bring in a dandy. There he comes. And if you look at his hairstyle and you compare it to that of the penguin has been named after these guys who had a macaroni hairstyle. Southern bald ibis. Here we are. This is the bird, and its scientific name is Geronticus calvus. Perhaps you can see something of the name in the Geronticus, geriatric. So this is Greek for an old man, Geronticus. Calvus, bareheaded. So bald-headed old man. This is what this bird is. This is the village indigo bird. Its scientific name is Vidua calibeata. Vidua is Latin for a widow, being a black bird in black attire. But we come to the interesting part. Calypse refers to steel. It's got a blue, shiny, like polished steel. And this is referring to a tribe that lived on the southern shores of the Black Sea in what is today Turkey. They are the first people who have known to have forged iron. So steel in Latin became known calypse after this tribe, who were the first to forge iron. And so it has inherited its name from this tribe. There are rumors, or some people think, that King Arthur's magical sword, the Excalibur, is related to this tribe. Now we come to the next category, what people imagined. Now we're stepping even further away from reality. We're coming into the world of myths and mythology. Here we have the gray-headed kingfisher. And its scientific name is Halcyon leucocephala. Let's just look at the second part. Leuco is white. Your white blood cells are your leukocytes. So that's white. Cephala, if you encephalitis, you have something in your head. So a white head. Interesting, the scientific name says white head. The English or common name says gray-headed. Just a difference of opinion. But what interests us is the word Alcyon. And there's a whole myth around that. Alcyon was the daughter of Aeolus, the ruler of the winds. That's important. Alcyon married Gyx, who died in a shipwreck, so he was drowned. Alcyon was so distraught, she drowned herself as well. So now they both drowned in the sea. But the gods took pity and mercy on them and turned them into kingfishers. So now there were these two kingfishers living in the sea, and they started to nest, and they built their nest and raised their young on the sea. This is mythology, so don't get worried. And in order to help them, the gods stilled the waters while they were nesting and feeding and raising their young. Now, if you read stories of people doing sailing trips around the world and they come to islands where the water and the days are beautiful, you'll read, they write sentences like, and those were halcyon days. And this is where this whole phrase, English, that is even used in English, comes from, this particular and other kingfishers of the genus Alcyon. We come to another myth. This is not a Greek myth. This time it's from Chile. This concerns the petrels. This is the European storm petrel depicted, but I'm going to talk about the Pincoya storm petrel. You can see by the name that it's Pincoya is a foreign name. Oceanites is the god of the primeval waters, but Pincoya is what interests us at this point. Pincoya is a Chiletan spirit that's from Chile, personifying the fertility of marine species. It could predict the success or failure of fishing expeditions. So what the Pincoya was a fairy. She would appear on the beach when the fishermen are getting their boats ready to be launched. And if she danced with arms outstretched, dancing towards the sea, then the fishing expedition was going to be very successful. However, if this Pincoya fairy stood on the beach but faced the fishermen up the beach and danced with the arms outstretched towards them, then there would not be a successful fishing hunt. We come to the common ringed plover. I'm going to depict another plover of which I have an illustration. This is the chestnut-banded plover, but we're talking about the common ringed plover, and its name is Charadrius hiaticula. Now, Charadrius is what is going to interest us. It is described by Aristotle as a yellowish bird dwelling in clefts. And hiaticula, you can see the word hiatus coming in there. Hiatus, a split, a division. Kula is an inhabitant. Think of colony or colonial, a dweller. So what does this bird mean? A cleft-dwelling plover or bird. But what interests us is this Charadrius bird has diagnostic powers. And dating from way back Aristotle's time, there was, if a person was sick and the Charadrius bird landed nearby and look at its face, it's looking away from the sick person. Well, unfortunately, that's a bad omen. The Charadrius is looking away. But if you have a sick person and the Charadrius bird is looking at the sick person, then that's a good omen. The bird is looking at the person. This person's going to survive. Unfortunately, the one on the left isn't going to survive. But that's not where the story stops. What about the Charadrius today? Anybody recognize this coat of arms? Here you have depicted a Charadrius bird. It's got two necks and two heads, and they're looking in opposite directions. It means that it's going to do a prognosis, but you don't know if it's going to be good or bad. So that's why it's got two heads. And this is the coat of arms of Medunsa, the Medical University of South Africa. Here's another coat of arms with two Charadrius birds on either side, the South African Medical and Dental Council. The black sawwing. Let's see what it looks like. Here he arrives. And his name is the genus Psallidoprocne, Pristoptera. Perhaps you can recognize the ptera part, something at the end. Pristo means a saw. So it's got a saw wing. If you look at the edge of the wing, you can see it looks like a saw. But what interests us is going to be the name Procne. Psallido means a pair of scissors. So it's a pair of scissors, swallow with saw wings. Psallidoprocne. We break it up. Procne. Procne is a figure, a minor figure in Greek mythology. She was turned into a swallow. And the story goes, it's not a very pretty story, but it goes something like this. Procne married, she was the daughter of Pandion. She married a guy, a king called Tereus. They lived happily for a while. They had a son. But then Tereus did something naughty, bad. He raped Procne's sister. Procne was so angered that she killed her own son, who was the son of her husband, Tereus. When Tereus learned about this event, pursued Procne in order to kill her in return. She pleaded and prayed to the gods to save her, and they turned her into a swallow. So she was just able to fly away. And that's how she saved her life. So when you see a swallow, think of Procne flying around. Oh, this is a sad bird, the red-throated wryneck. Here he is, related to the woodpeckers, and his name is Jinx ruficollis. Rufus, red, collis, your collar, your neck, so it's red neck. But what interests us is Aristotle's account of this bird. He talks about the jinx, this bird called jinx. He says that the jinx reminds him or is likened to a serpent because it sticks out its tongue like a serpent, and it can also swivel its head like a serpent. It can turn without turning its body. It swivels its head. Now, this bird related to woodpeckers does have indeed a very long tongue. It goes and catches ants on trees, and when threatened, it can emit a hissing sound and swivel its head so that it does resemble a serpent. But the mystique about this bird was used for magical purposes. People would catch this bird, they were tied to a wheel, and while they spun the wheel around with the bird tied to it, they would recite magical verses and they thought that it had magical powers and they could influence people or bring back unfaithful lovers or things like that. But this name has come into the English language. And when you're trying to fix something and you can never fix it and you end up saying this thing is jinxed, it comes from this bird and the magical use and its power to cast spells on people. This is what people thought. Now we come to what is human is people make mistakes. And we talk about the cattle egret, the lowly tick bird that we know so well. You can see by the name that there's something wrong. Ardia means heron, and ibis is an ibis, not an egret. Now, what has happened here? One of Linnaeus's pupils called Hazelquist, a Swedish gentleman, was sent on an expedition to Egypt. And he had an Egyptian guide, a dragoman that is called in Egypt. A guide that guides you in Egypt is a dragoman. And this dragoman was able to convince Hazelquist that the cattle egret, the tick bird, was indeed the sacred bird of Egypt that appears in hieroglyphics. He so convinced him that Hazelquist made all his notes according to that era. Hazelquist then left Egypt. He went to Asia Minor, but unfortunately he died in Sardis. His notes and books and specimens found their way back to Europe, where Linnaeus got hold of them. And in studying Hazelquist's note, Linnaeus then copied the information that he had and fixed the name as a heron, an ibis heron, and followed the trick or the lack or wrong information that was given to Hazelquist by this Egyptian guide. We come to the well-known Bokmakiri, Telophorus zelonus. Telos means the end, or far, phorus, to carry in Greek. So it's got something that carries far, and that's obviously is its call. But what interests us is zelonus. Zelonus is the Latin for Ceylon. Now, the Bokmakiri does not occur in Ceylon. It's not anywhere near Ceylon. So what could have happened? Well, it seems that what may have happened is that when the specimens came back to Europe to be examined, they had little tags tied to them. Perhaps they omitted to write the place of origin, where it came from. And so the person doing the examination would say, where did this bird come from? Oh, it came from a crate on that ship. What ship was that? Oh, it was that ship that came from Ceylon. Oh, so this bird is from Ceylon. Perhaps what may well have happened is that the bird did come from Ceylon, but stopped at the Cape to get food and give the sailors rest, and the crate was added. But that's how errors come in. The grey-crowned crane, beautiful bird, but there's something wrong. Balearica regularum. Regulus, regularum, the king, that's fine. But there's a mistake with Balearica pertaining to the Balearic Islands in the Mediterranean Sea. It does not occur there and has never occurred there. So an error has been made. There might have been some other cranes in antiquity who lived there, a black crane possibly, but not at all there. Great frigate bird. I think you can see just by looking at the name, that's the scientific name, great frigate bird as compared to fregata minor. There's something wrong there. And here he comes, a great frigate bird. But what has happened? The people identifying it compared it to pelicans rather than other frigate birds. They thought it was a small pelican, but in fact, it's the largest of the frigate birds. The last category we look at is an interesting one, anagrams. An anagram is you take a name, a word, and you swap its letters around and you create a new word out of that. So we have the shrikes are called lanius, which means butcher in Latin. And you can imagine that shrikes are known for impaling their insects or their meat on thorns. But if you're going to a butchery and you look at the back, you see hooks with meat hanging. There's a bird called the brubru, which is related to shrikes, but not a true shrike. And its genus is Nilaus. So if you compare Lanius and Nilaus, you see the same letters. Nilaus is meaningless, except that it's an anagram. You got the pintado petrel, also known as the Cape pigeon. The word pintado originates from the Portuguese. The early sailors who came here, means painted. Its genus name is Daption. So the pintado becomes the genus Daption, an anagram of pintado. There's a spotted crake, Porzana in Italian, and the black crake is Zapornia. A little I, the letter I has crept in there, but otherwise it's an anagram. And finally, the word swallow is a chelidon, and a bird related to the swallows is the martin. And the house martin is delichon, not a true swallow, but related. So chelidon becomes delichon. Well, that's the end of the scientific names and the variety. In all, in the book that I've prepared, there are 886, and each bird's name is analyzed in this particular way and explained. It's only the birds of South Africa. If I can just go briefly into the background. Here I am illustrating the birds. I did it with water-based color crayons. And there's my desk. In the middle there, you can see a magnifying glass, pair of spectacles, a good light, drawing papers, and the images that I used to draw from. Metallic colored crayons as well. I'm colorblind, so my wife had to come and often help me with greens, browns, and reds to get the colors correct there. This is what the table looks like, and my wife is now happy once again. As a child, my mother at about the age 11 introduced me to birds. We identified a bird in the garden, and she left me with the bird book in my hands, and I started writing my own little bird book. So this is dating from 60 or more years ago when I was about 13. I wrote my own notes and did my own drawings of birds. In the top right-hand corner, there's scientific names which I copied, but I had no idea what they meant. This is the hammerhead, hammerkop. Once again, I copied the names and I wrote out my little notes about them. And I've still got the book today. And I smile at the kind of things that I used to write. Over the years, I used to try and figure out things in my Robert's Bird book. And there you can see my attempts at writing out where bird names originated. The owl, Boas, is an owl. The marsh owl, Asio is its name. Asio, I thought, does that mean Asia? I said, oh no, finally I worked out that it means owl. The birds in the book are based on the checklist of South African birds. In the top right-hand corner, this is the latest one. So it's alphabetically, and the book follows exactly the same listing with all the latest names in those bird names there. My last, briefly, I just want to share what are the benefits of knowing bird names, apart from just out of interest or academically. As we saw, bird names can draw our attention to specific things about birds. my attention was drawn to the sandgrouse, that it has splendid wings. Every time I see a sandgrouse now, I say, oh, the bird with splendid wings. When I see the paradise flycatcher, I say, oh, the bird with the delightful sound. But it also introduces us to our history. The history, people 200 years ago were naming birds. And some of the names come from the original people who lived there before the European explorers. So we've inherited some of the names that have come. For example, Le Vaillant named the African pied wagtail Motacilla aguimp. Now he explains in his notes that aguimp is a Nama name from the Nama people. So we have inherited Nama language from 220 years ago or so. And he explains further that aguimp has to be preceded with a click before each part of the name, aguimp. So I've tried to practice aguimp, something like that. Same with the pale-colored starling, Onocronatus naburup. He says it's also a Nama name, but you've got to put a click in front of the naburup, so it becomes naburup. So we learn things that we never knew. We learn about explorers, Francois Le Vaillant, William Burchell, Andrew Smith, and we read about these amazing people. But the most important thing, we go back to the wing, and we realize that the Wright brothers learned all about the aerodynamics and how to fly by studying the wings of birds, buzzards, pigeons, gulls, and terns. They would watch them and stand on the beach and imitate their wing movements and how they turned. And people watching these two brothers thought they were a little bit cuckoo, to use a phrase that we've learned to use, these men. But what they were doing was developing wing warping and the shape of the wing to create lift. And even to this day, we develop aircraft based on and name them. This is an aircraft with a canard wing. That wing that's in front of the aircraft there is called a canard, and the word canard in French means a duck. So it's copied from the bill of a duck. And the wingtip vortex, a problem for aeroplanes. There's the modern planes have the end of the wings turned up. The high pressure under the wing tries to migrate around the edge of the wing to the low pressure on top, and it loses lift and causes drag and induces a vortex, which is all slowing the plane down. So how do you eliminate that? You look at birds, and you look at the end of these big birds, and you look at the tips of their wings. They turned up. The stalks also are like that. And so this is how even birds and their wings influence us and are important to us today. Well, thank you very much. That's the end of my talk.
Wow, Eddie, thank you so very much. That was truly, truly fascinating. And yeah, to share your knowledge and passion and give us a glimpse into a fantastic sort of history and where words come from. It's been fascinating. Thank you very, very much. Just before we get to the questions, I want to ask, are any birds named that there aren't a meaning for it? I know the anagrams, but are there ones that just don't mean anything? Or is all scientific names for the birds, have they all got a connection?
There's the, one of the seagulls is called Xema. Which one is it? The laughing gull, I think it is Xema. It's a totally made up name. And there's one of the swallows is called Melba. The cliff swallow is called Melba. And somebody once commented that it seems that the people who were allocating names ran out of ideas, and when they no longer knew what word, what name to give to them, they simply reverted to inventing new names. So there are those two examples, Xema and Melba.
Yeah, so it does happen. There we go. Okay, as mentioned, we welcome questions as they are coming in. There's some in the chat box and some in the Q&A. If you can put them in the Q&A, it's just easier for me to find them. Margarita's asked, did the sailors name the albatross as an Elba White? From the Elba White?
No, it comes from It comes from an Arabic word meaning a bucket bird. There's a long story. Alcatraz originates from Arabic, and it referred at first to the pelican, and because of it referred to a bucket because of its bucket beak. The penitentiary in San Francisco, Alcatraz, used to have pelicans living on it. But then the idea of the pelican, that it's a great white bird, shifted to great white seabirds. So Alcatraz slowly became albatross and moved away from pelicans to other great white seabirds. So that's how albatross got its name.
There we go. Marjorie's asked, is it true that, let me get this name right, Le Valiant named the Narinia Trogo after a Hottentot maiden and the classes Cuckoo after his servant on his travels to Southern Africa?
Absolutely correct. Le Vaillant, yes, he had a whole entourage around him, and Klaas was his the leading person of Khoi descent. He would lead the oxen when they traveled, but he also became his confidant, would give him the names, the local names of birds, and make contact with local people. And Narina was a young maiden, and that was also part of the entourage. There are theories that he had a bit of a fling with her, but in his notes he says he's sorry to disappoint the reader, but nothing like that happened. They did have a nice little flirtatious relationship, but nothing serious developed. But this is the other wonderful thing. We learn about these people that we would otherwise never know about, but their names are recorded. And the whole story of the Pitmayfro, the whole incident is also recorded by him, which is a very amusing incident.
It's fantastic. There's just comments from everybody here. Just so interesting, fascinating, loving the stories, love the illustrations. Just a lot of people really saying thank you for sharing with us and have been inspired and intrigued and fascinated by it. So it's just to get some of the comments that have been coming through here. In terms of ornithology, do we have many well-known South African ornithologists, or is there who was the first one? Yeah, a bit of history about some of our South African ornithologists.
Well, Le Vaillant is reputed or generally agreed to that being the first South African ornithologist in South Africa. He was Frenchman, but he traveled in the Eastern Cape in the late 1700s, and he wrote very extensively about birds. He's focused on birds a lot, and then he went back and wrote 6 volumes with illustrations of them, and it's a wonderful work that he did. He gave them a lot of French names. He didn't agree with the scientific names, by the way. He thought the names that the local people gave, who knew the living specimens, who knew their habits and where they lived and what they ate. He thought these are the names that should be reserved, because they are names that depict living birds, rather than sending the birds back to Europe as dead specimens and people examining them and thinking up names for them. Yeah, there are other great explorers like William Burchell, a wonderful man who unfortunately ended his life as a recluse and then finally committed suicide. It's so sad when you read all that he contributed, and he was a very kind gentleman. And there's Andrew Smith as well, who contributed a lot. Yeah.
Amazing. Sue's asked you, why was the steel blue widow finch name changed to a most helpful name of village indigo bird?
There's been a lot of name changes. It's been one of the problems I've had, because I started during COVID years, and every time I got one of those new checklists, I'd have to check and go through the names, and then the alphabetical order changes as well, so you've got to rearrange things. 2 reasons why bird names change are beloved lories has become Pterocles, for example, and our grey lory is now a go-away bird. In the 80s and before that, South Africa was an isolated country, and our names, we just used our names, and we didn't have contact with bird bodies from around the world. But after the change and we became an open society, we've become affiliated to the bodies around the world that name birds. And so there's a need to have one name, one genus per species, or to name the same bird with the same name around the world. Otherwise, you end up with mix-ups if you got different names for similar birds. For example, our nedeke is not a nedeke around the world. Around the world, it's the piping cisticola. But in South Africa, we've just retained the name nedeke. So if you go to America and talk about a nedeke, they won't know what you're talking about. I was on a farm in America, and I was looking out the window, and I pointed to the owner. I said, "Oh, there's a thrush." I could see it was a thrush doing exactly what thrushes do on the ground, tossing leaves around. And he said, no, that's a robin. I said, no, I know that is a thrush. He said, listen, I've grown up on this farm my whole life. I know that is a robin. So I said, okay, whoa, let me give me your bird book. And then I looked it up and I saw it. Indeed, it was called a robin, but its scientific name is turdus. I said, oh, that's where the problem lies. Turdus is a thrush, but in America they call it robin. And then there's been DNA testing that has shown that what people thought were related birds has in fact shown that the relationship belongs to another genus. So there's been name changes in that direction as well. Hope that helps.
Yes, definitely. Anne has asked, and again, the battle with the Verreaux's eagle and Verreaux's eagle owl. Who, how or who were they named after or by?
Yes, there are three brothers. The Verreaux brothers came to South Africa, to the Cape from France, and they had a huge bird museum in France, and they came and collected and opened a shop in Cape Town as well. There was Jules Verreaux and Edouard Verreaux, so they were brothers, and they dealt in birds and sending specimens back. So some of the Verreaux are named after Jules, others are named after Edouard Verreaux, but they all have the name Verreaux. But there's the guinea fowl, the crested guinea fowl is named Edouard, Gutera Edwardi, and that is Edouard Verreaux. So it's got his first name. And that's, by the way, my favorite name, because my name in French is Edouard. So you'll see it on the book. It's next to my name. That's just a little anecdote there.
Fantastic, thank you. Gilly has asked, has the fish eagle changed its scientific name?
Not that I know of. The name vocifère was given by Le Vaillant in 1700, the call that carries. So I'm not aware that there's been any change there.
That's fantastic. Eddie, thank you so much. I don't have any more questions. Last, if anybody wants to sneak something in quickly while we were saying, but it looks like it's all done. Eddie, thank you so much again. Just to echo the comments from everybody, just very, very grateful for sharing your time, sharing your passion, sharing your knowledge. We appreciate you. Would love to have you back again. To all of our guests who've joined us for our talk, thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you all in a month's time. Thank you to Belinda behind the scenes for making this all possible. Eddie, thanks you once again. Hope you all have a fantastic day. Good rest of the week. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in a month's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.